Deputy President. Well, Capitol Hill is a long way from the Fremantle Town Hall. It's a long way from a place known for thousands of years as Walliabutt, or more recently known as Bibra Lake in the Beeliar wetland chain in Perth's southern suburbs. We're a long way from the bumper-to-bumper container traffic on Tideman Road in North Freo, from the quiet suburban streets of Palmyra and Northlake. But tonight I'm here to pay my respects to those people who are speaking up and stepping up for all of those places, for the issue that has long since outgrown the immediate impact area in Melbourne, in Melville, in Coburn and Fremantle has become, in fact, a $2 billion albatross hanging around the neck of the Barnett government, and I'm speaking, of course, of the Perth Freight Link. And I'm here tonight to remind the Senate that the Perth Freight Link is actually a national issue, because Premier Barnett, having driven the state's finances off a cliff, now wants taxpayers from all over the country to pay for this concrete debacle. We've been seeking, and colleagues in the other place, principally Ms Alana McTiernan, the federal member for Perth, and us here in the Senate have been seeking, and also state colleagues in the Western Australian Parliament out of the Barnett Government Public Service there, have been seeking basic information on the Perth Freight Link. It was initially pitched as a $1.6 billion project that would link Roe Highway extension through the Beeliar wetlands, through Melville to hit Stock Road and then up and somehow into Fremantle. They've been trying to get basic information out of the Barnett government, who came up with this mad idea, and out of the Abbott government, who sight unseen, without cost-benefit analysis, without a business case, without a route alignment, without traffic modelling, without environmental impact assessment, said, sure, we'll give you $1 billion for that. Unbelievable. Circumventing Infrastructure Australia's assessment processes, which are not perfect, which are not completely arm's length, but are a hell of a lot better than what we've got now. And we've been trying to find out some basic information. Those things that I just listed are not in the public domain. Some of those documents exist. Some of them have been seen by Infrastructure Australia, and none of them are in the public domain. And the reason for that, as we hear from people who've been involved in their preparation, is that the numbers don't stack up. That if the business case was ever put on the table, the project would collapse. That if the cost-benefit analysis, such as it is, was ever produced, the case for the project would collapse. The fact that the Abbott government could commit, and now we hear that it could be including bridges, maybe this imaginary tunnel that the state transport minister has dreamed up, with whatever on earth the government intends to do in North Fremantle, that the project could cost as much as $2.5 billion. There is no alignment. The government doesn't even know how it intends to connect this thing to the container port in Fremantle Harbour. We've been seeking, through orders for production of documents and through freedom of information requests, information on any evidence at all that Aboriginal consultation was done. There are important sacred sites within the impact area that are proposed to be flattened within the Beeliar wetland chain. Whether the entire business case, rather than the rather glib, dismissive and insulting 30-page pamphlet that was put into the public domain, doesn't answer basic questions about how the hell the government thinks this project stacks up. So we've been seeking, through orders of production of documents, one of them which lapsed today, and we got this letter that Senator Cash tabled, representing Senator Cash. You're only here in a representative capacity. Nonetheless, you speak for the Abbott government and you are a minister assisting in this matter, and you're also a resident of Western Australia. You would know through you, Mr Deputy President, just how deeply unpopular this thing is. And instead of those documents being put on the table, we were told it's all commercial in confidence. That is effectively a public interest immunity claim that says it is in the public interest that you don't know where $2.5 billion that you raised in taxes is going to go and how it's going to be spent on this project. So instead of getting the documents and having them put into the public domain on this project, which is looking increasingly brittle, and the Barnett government, you would have to say, is looking increasingly desperate to talk about something else, instead of putting them in the public domain, we get this rather insulting letter back saying it's all going to be commercial in confidence. We've also moved, which will be voted on tomorrow, so I won't reflect on that outcome because maybe there'll be a change of heart, for a list of other material that I think is of extreme importance in trying to find out where the government's head is on this. And so we'll see what happens tomorrow. But in the meantime, on the basis of the fact that the government has refused to put that information into the public domain, tomorrow we're going to be giving notice of a short, sharp Senate inquiry to be conducted into the decision-making process that led to this extraordinary decision to commit more than $1 billion worth of Commonwealth funding to this project. The decision-making process, the information that was relied on by state and Commonwealth governments that informed the decision, and looking at serious options that are out there, evaluating what the other options are for dealing in the growth of the freight task through metropolitan Perth, particularly container traffic, although I acknowledge there's obviously other quite rapidly growing freight moving through the Fremantle port. There are alternatives. We want the government to look at those alternatives rather than just blindly committing to this bizarre concrete folly that's become known as the Perth Freight Link. So I look forward to the support of Senate colleagues when that is voted on Thursday. A short, sharp Senate inquiry that I would suggest calls the State Transport Minister, calls Main Roads WA to account. The state government believes this project is wonderful, and if they think it's so great, let them front a Senate committee and tell us how great. More to the point, let them put that documented evidence on the table so that we can see exactly what it is that they're on about. So in the hope that that inquiry gets up, we would seek something fairly short and sharp that would travel to Perth and that would finally, I think, put the public and put some decision makers into the picture as to where the government is heading. There's growing understanding, obviously, that stopping the Perth Freight Link won't be enough. And at that event at the Fremantle Town Hall 3 or 4 weeks ago, it was very obvious to those in the room and the 150 people who couldn't even fit in the room and listen to the event on a loudspeaker in King's Square that we've hit a tipping point, that this project is going to be stopped. It's like Ningaloo or the campaign to save the old growth forests or to stop uranium mines in Western Australia. We've got a pretty good track record when people link arms and stick up for each other. But we understand that stopping the Perth Freight Link, and we will, won't be enough. That we have to get behind the work that's being done by Professor Peter Newman and his team at Curtin University Sustainability Policy Institute, or CUSP, about a dedicated rail link from Kewdale to the Latitude 32 industrial site, the intermodal terminal there, and then careful evaluation of the outer harbour. So that's a container terminal to take overflow container traffic out of the Fremantle port. We are effectively trying to route a 21st century freight highway, or maybe a late 20th century freight highway, through a 19th century port, and it's simply at or even over capacity. So we understand, and I think the community understands, that we need to look seriously at the alternatives. We're there, we're at the table, it's time, and local government is at the table. Mayors from 4 local councils spoke at that event in Fremantle, including Mr Russell Aubrey from Melville, who's pro the proposal, but the 3 mayors from Coburn, Fremantle and East Fremantle who spoke up strongly on behalf of their constituents that there is a better way around this. There are groups that have been involved for years, for more than 20 years, in trying to bring the government to its senses. And I want to acknowledge those from Save Beelia Wetlands, from Rethink the Link, from the Road to Rail group, those who've been at this for a really long time. But also the Maritime Union of Australia, the MUA, those who actually operate the equipment in the harbour, load and unload the ship and keep our town moving, who know that the sale of the port, the proposed privatisation of the Port of Fremantle, is key to what's being done here. One last massive taxpayer-funded binge to enable more rapid freight transport into the port before it is sold off. And to groups like Fern and Conservation Council of WA, the Urban Bushland Council, and particularly Aboriginal mob and people without significant resources who are nonetheless speaking up for country. These are the people collectively who are training up for non-violent direct action. There are people already occupying some of the houses that have been resumed in Palmyra and are pretty well dug in. And it would be an enormous mistake to malign these people as professional protesters. These are ordinary householders and residents who did not want this concrete container pipeline blasting through quiet suburban neighbourhoods, and who have suddenly found themselves on the sharp end of resumption notices as their properties are compulsorily acquired. If the state government maligns and misrepresents these people as professional protesters, you will misunderstand the motivation, you'll misunderstand the message, You will misread the resourcefulness, and most importantly, you will misread the resolve, because the Perth Freight Link is not going to get built.
Thank you, Senator Ludlam. Senator